If you were given a superpower, what kind of superpower would you want? In the year 2025, the Earth was invaded by extraterrestrial life and humanity was defeated. It wasn't until 2038 when genetically engineered soldiers emerged and turned the tide of the war, forcing the extraterrestrial life to retreat beyond the Earth's borders. After that, the gene exam officially started in 2050. As long as you were 18 years old and reached the passing score, you could inject the gene liberation drug and gain superpowers. It is now the year 2137, and there's a high school student named Sutue in class 7 of grade 3 at Gene City High School. He has always aspired to fight against the alien invaders and strives to become a glorious genetic soldier. For so many years, he has been studying and training tirelessly, just like the current college entrance examination, all for the qualification to take the gene exam. After more than a decade of hard work, success or failure hinges on this one exam. At this moment, his phone rang. Sutue, the injection has a 1% mortality rate. Are you really going to take it? It doesn't matter. Let's just not take this exam. I have already passed the dual excellence line for the gene exam. It would be a shame not to try, he replied. Plus, the mortality rate is only 1%. Mom is just worried about you, said his mother. Don't worry, Mom, everything will be fine, he reassured her. The broadcast just announced that it's time to enter. I have to go now. As the broadcast announced, students who are taking the gene liberation drug injection can now enter the hall. Sutue arrived to find that it was already packed with people. There were many types of genetic points that could be unlocked through the injection, including extreme strength enhancement and unique abilities. However, there were also strange powers that not only proved useless, but also brought harm to the user. He thought to himself, if only I could awaken the power of X-ray vision. Still pretty good. With the prompt from the staff, the next person to be injected is Sutue. Fingerprint matching passed, iris comparison passed. Nervously, he arrived at the door of room 25. Just as he was about to knock on the door, suddenly, a loud explosion occurred. Sutue was scared silly. What's going on? He saw the student next door engulfed in flames. Distorted face, screams piercing through the ears. The staff quickly grabbed the fire extinguisher and put out the fire for him. But it was too late. He had already been burned to charcoal. The doctor coldly called for security and quickly put him in a bag, which made Sutue hesitate for a moment. Wasn't it said that there was only a 1% mortality rate? A living person just suddenly disappeared like this. Could it happen to me too? This incident made Sutue hesitate in his heart. Fingers cracking, compared to genetic collapse. I want to go out of the earth more. In the end, the ideal overcame fear. So he took a deep breath and knocked on the door of the pharmacy. Then he walked straight in. Hello, I'm student Sutue. At this point, the doctor in the room turned around and asked, Sutue, right? Before the gene injection, I have to ask you a question. Are you aware of and understand the risk of death that comes with the gene liberation drug? Sutue's gaze was firm. I am willing. The doctor picked up the medicine. The program is complete. Very well, student Sutue. Please take off your pants. What? Sutue was scared silly, standing still. Don't misunderstand. The gene activation stabilizer drug is most effective when injected through the femoral artery. Hearing this, Sutue blushed and took off his pants. Okay, can you please be gentle? Then a scream echoed through the empty hall. C-level gene-compliant chain allele drug injection is complete. Vital signs are stable. Brain waves are normal. Each data is stable. 10 minutes later, the doctor asked, do you feel anything in other parts of your body? No, nothing at all, Sutue replied. After 30 minutes of observation, there were no abnormal reactions. However, an abnormal reaction would indicate the efficacy of the medicine. Sutue wondered if he had failed to awaken his abilities. The doctor walked up to him and said, I have never encountered a situation like yours before. You can get out of bed now. As soon as Sutue stood up, he felt his legs go weak. He suddenly had difficulty breathing and then collapsed. The doctor panicked when his heartbeat exceeded 180 and his body temperature rose to over 50 degrees. All vital signs were chaotic, and Sutue's hands continued to grasp upward. Is this how my life will end? He thought. Just when Sutue thought he was certain to die, his consciousness slowly fell into darkness. The surroundings were silent, but suddenly there was a burst of light in front of him. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar place. In the middle of the field was a meditating silhouette. Is that me? Sutue noticed 14 star points on the silhouette. What's going on? He wondered. Suddenly, a sharp pain pulled him back to the real world. Student Sutue, after electric shock therapy, your body has returned to normal vital signs, the doctor said. Sutue sat up from the bed and felt a tearing pain in his chest. What's wrong with me? He asked. The doctor told Sutue, "You have activated 14 mysterious genetic points, but they are all of the wisdom type." Sutue's smile froze instantly. He couldn't believe it and asked, "Teacher, are you mistaken? All 14 are wisdom type? This is the final exam result. It will be entered into the system soon. Take a look yourself. I heard that wisdom type is related to public relations research. In the future, most jobs will be clerical. What about the teacher? What are my abilities?" Activating gene base points does not necessarily mean acquiring certain abilities. Even if you do acquire them, it won't be easy to determine. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called the mysterious system, right? Now Sutue is completely discouraged, as he said. At this moment, the doctor took out a business card. "This is my business card. If you have any questions about the wisdom type aspect of applying for the Huaxia Genetic Evolution University, you can ask me." Looking at the content on the business card, and Xiao Shui, professor of mysterious students at Huaxia Genetic Evolution University, Sutue was surprised that she was already a professor at such a young age. "Teacher, if there's nothing else, I'll go now." Sutue stood up to leave. Just as Sutue was about to open the door, Professor N suddenly spoke up. "Wait a minute. I just want to remind you not to be targeted by the Hope Redemption Organization. They are a group of traitors who have colluded with extraterrestrial invaders to betray humanity. Several major failures on the extraterrestrial battlefield and decades of stalemate have been linked to them. They have recently been kidnapping talented students for human experiments. 5 students with more than 10 gene points have mysteriously disappeared. Just be careful." "Thank you, teacher," Sutue said. He thought to himself, if being kidnapped requires having more than 10 gene points, and I have awakened 14 gene points, won't I become a prime target? This is a big problem. Just as Sutue said goodbye to Professor N and walked in the hall of the genetic examination, he thought about the 14 light spots on the head of the phantom he saw earlier, and the 14 awakened wisdom-type gene points. What is the connection between these two? As he pondered, a voice interrupted him. "Sutue." It was his good friends Chingmo and Tang Ting who arrived. Chingmo had awakened 11 gene point, but they were all in his stomach, which made him feel very frustrated. It was obvious that he was going to become a big eater. Tang Ting patted his shoulder and reassured him, "It's okay, Chingmo. You might become the first person in history to become a gene transmutation rank by eating." The rank of gene awakeners is divided into 4 levels. Activate gene, gene direction change, gene evolution change, and gene evolution higher state. "Don't get too cocky, you fatso," Chingmo retorted. "All 8 of your gene points are probably in your hand speed. Who knows what you've been doing?" He followed it up with a deadly scissors kick to control the fatso. Suddenly, Chingmo asked, "By the way, Sutue, what did you awaken?" Sutue, of course, did not miss the opportunity to show off in front of his best friends. "Well, I only awakened 14 gene points," he said proudly. "You awakened 14 gene points? Let me feel it." Chingmo and Tang Ting were surprised, but Sutue was taken aback and quickly said, "Wait, I haven't finished yet. All of my gene points are of the wisdom type." Upon hearing this, the 2 friends did a 180-degree turn. "This is troublesome. It's hard to find a job with wisdom type gene points. I have a relative who was unemployed for 7 years and ended up becoming a monk," said Chingmo. Sutue was speechless. "Are you guys trying to force me to become a monk? It's okay. The fact that you awaken your genes is a good thing. Let's celebrate tonight." Sutue quickly declined, saying that he didn't feel well after awakening his genes, and left. On his way home, Sutue noticed that all the news reports were about Hope Redemption. Suddenly, he felt a headache, but then his vision became clear, and he was able to see everything around him without any blind spots. He even sensed some people behind the walls and even the kitchen behind many walls, but he couldn't perceive anything more detailed. It seemed that sensing the general outline was his limit for now. He decided to experiment more when he got home. However, after taking a few steps, he felt a strange sensation coming from afar. Just like being targeted by something, but suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of oppression, and then realized that 3 people had been keeping the same distance from him regardless of their speed. He never thought that he would actually be targeted by the Hope Redemption Organization. Sutue thought about whether or not to report it, but soon, he rejected the idea, knowing that the authorities would not believe a student who claimed to have discovered members of the Hope Redemption Organization, and it might even alert the organization. Oh, right, at this moment, Sutue remembered that Professor N had given him a business card before, and he could consult her to see if there was a better solution. Meanwhile, a meeting was being held in the Jinqing government office. Colonel Lu Tianhu, the guard of the Jinqing government, was arranging work matters when suddenly a cell phone rang in the quiet conference room. Professor N quickly checked the message and interrupted Colonel Lu. "I have a student named Sutue who is seeking my help, saying that he is being followed by someone. What should we do?" Director Zhou Xing of the Special Intelligence Agency spoke up. The person following this student is one of our agents, Professor N. You don't need to worry. However, Professor N still had doubts. Why would you send 2 agents to follow a student? Because it's part of our plan. What 2 agents? The student said there were 3. Where did the third one come from? Professor N quickly stood up. That third person could be a member of the Hope Redemption Organization. We should take him down to eliminate the security risk. But Zhou Xing hesitated and avoided eye contact, refusing to take action. This made Professor N furious. What do you mean by that? If you found a suspected member of the Hope Redemption Organization, why aren't you taking action? What are you planning to do? At this moment, the director of admissions, Jin Qiqiang, spoke up. He's just a wisdom-type student. Even if something happens to him, it's not a big deal. He's the perfect bait. Professor N slammed his hand on the table. Bait? Using a student who has only recently awakened 14 genetic points as bait. This is simply outrageous. Who approved this? I did. I did this to minimize losses during the university enrollment period. Professor N argued with reason. But you can't use a student who has just activated their genes as bait. What if something goes wrong? Colonel Liu was indifferent and replied, even if we take a step back and sacrifice a student who has only activated the wisdom-type gene, it's worth it if it means the safety of thousands of students. Professor N clenched her fists tightly, trying to control her anger, and left her seat to walk out. Sorry, I have something else to attend to. I'll leave first, she said. However, Director Jean stopped her. Professor N, please stay for the meeting. If you take action without authorization and the operation fails, the consequences will be disastrous. Professor N pushed away his hand and replied, I can refrain from taking action, but I can't guarantee that Su Tue won't do anything. Colonel Liu intervened, send a message to appease him immediately, but don't reveal our plan. In front of the command center, Professor N messaged Su Tue, who was relieved to discover that 2 of the students were actually undercover agents protecting him. Wait a minute, if they knew it was dangerous, why didn't they take action directly? Is this some kind of phishing law enforcement? I'm the bait. I can't just sit and wait for death. I must find a way to save myself, Su Tue thought. He looked at the beverage shop in front of him and quickly came up with a plan. He walked into the shop and went to the counter. I want a cup of milk tea. Use boiling water, the hotter the better. Soon, Su Tue received the milk tea and walked out of the shop. The man with an unfriendly face continued to follow him, and Su Tue realized that this was the third person. Su Tue's expression turned serious, and he suddenly stopped and turned around. He directly poured the scalding milk tea onto the man's face. The man instantly put on a mask of pain. The screams were endless. You little stinker, when did you discover me? Never mind, even bringing the body back can get the job done. Go to hell. Immediately he launched an attack and rushed straight towards Su Tue's face. Su Tue didn't expect the man to be unaffected at all. Just one blow sent Su Tue flying several meters, crashing into the building behind him. Su Tue couldn't resist the tremendous force and lay on the ground panting heavily. He's from Hope Redemption. Special Ops brother, catch him quickly. It's well known that Hope Redemption is a human traitor. Hearing this, the bystanders were frightened and fled in all directions. In an instant, only the 4 of them were left, and the scene suddenly became explosive. The 2 Special Ops officers hesitated about how Su Tue discovered them, but their actions showed no sign of haste or slowness as they quickly attacked. However, the man faced the 2 of them alone without any panic. Then he punched one of the Special Ops officers in the face heavily. Seeing that the situation was not good, Su Tue tried to stand up forcibly to assist in the battle, but a sharp pain struck him and made him sit back down weakly. Damn it, I'm really useless. I can't help at all in times of danger. At this moment, Su Tue's consciousness returned to the place where he had been unconscious. Su Tue was sure that the 14 glowing dots above his head were the genes he had awakened. So, are these gray dots the genes that haven't been awakened yet? In that case, can I directly introspect my own body structure? If there is enough energy, can't the other gene points also be developed? He reached out his right hand and tried to control the flow of energy. There was a reaction. The energy inside his body slowly gathered towards his arm. The piercing pain was like the blood vessels on his arm were about to burst. The genes were gradually lit up, and controlling the flow of energy opened the genes. This was definitely an unprecedented feat. Meanwhile, outside, the 2 Special Ops officers and the man had been fighting for a long time. 2 people were knocked down by the man to the ground. The man walked to Su Tue with a fierce look on his face. No one can save you this time, he said, with an evil smile on his face, reaching out to grab Su Tue. Suddenly, Su Tue opened his eyes and punched the man with a powerful force, causing him to spit out blood and fly backwards, hitting the wall and leaving a deep hole. He fell to the ground severely injured. 2 two special agents quickly subdued the man and arrested him. At this moment, Professor N in the conference room was still worried about Su-Tui's safety. It's been so long without any news. Could he have been killed? Just then, Zhou Xing's phone rang. After answering the call, Zhou Xing looked very surprised and then said to everyone, "That student named Su-Tui is in trouble." Colonel Liu was furious and asked, "You couldn't even track a high school student? What are your people doing?" Zhou Xing replied nervously. Not only was he not injured, but he even helped two special agents capture the tracker in the name of Hope Redemption. He messed up our plan. How did he know that was a member of Hope Redemption? Who leaked the information? Colonel Liu looked at Professor N with an unfriendly expression, but Professor N remained calm and suggested, "Shall we check my personal communication device?" Colonel Liu had nothing to say in response, so he ordered Zhou Xing to investigate the matter. Later, the staff at the Jin City Special Agent Office reported to Zhou Xing that the man's name was Ma Shuaho, also known as Autumn Pants, an E-level member of Hope Redemption with considerable strength. Neither of the two special agents were his match. During interrogation, Su-Tui claimed that his punch was thrown by luck, as the other person was already on the verge of collapsing at the time. This explanation managed to pass. Zhou Xing was very satisfied with Su-Tui's performance and awarded him 6 merit points. It's worth noting that an E-level traitor is worth a maximum of 10 merit points, so it was a pleasant surprise for Su-Tui. In addition, Su-Tui learned from Zhou Xing that this year, 15 gene points in Gonglin and 16 gene points in Tongqi were being secretly protected by someone. However, they hadn't discovered that there might also be people from Hope Redemption around them. But now, the most important thing is to protect oneself. After leaving the interrogation room, Su-Tui quickly dialed Professor N's phone number. "Director Zhou told me that I was just a decoy. Is this true?" "Yes, it's true. You can check the annual entrance exam news." Su-Tui clenched his fist, thinking that if it weren't for that guy's carelessness that revealed a flaw, today's situation would be uncertain. The phone call with Professor N made Su-Tui even more determined to become stronger. 3 days later, the mother held the acceptance letter with excitement on her face. It turned out to be Huaxia University of Genetic Evolution, ranked first in the Global Alliance. At this moment, Su-Tui walked out of the house looking exhausted. He had been trying to break through these past few days, and his body had become very weak. Su-Tui didn't even have time to be happy and enjoy the food that was being served. The parents were ecstatic and couldn't stop smiling, even taking pictures to show off on social media. This made Su-Tui speechless. These past 3 days, Su-Tui had exhausted all his strength to open up a gene point in his left leg and even fainted once in the process. Su-Tui looked at his left leg, which had no reaction, but his right hand had become more agile. He realized that the path to becoming stronger was long and arduous. Su-Tui's father noticed that something was wrong and advised him not to overdo it. He understood that Su-Tui wanted to celebrate his acceptance into university, but he also knew that moderation was key, and too much exertion would only lead to exhaustion. After listening to his father's words, Su-Tui felt embarrassed, realizing that he had been misunderstood. Finally, to celebrate his successful admission to university, Dad gave him a gift, which turned out to be an E-grade gene supplement drug. This drug is not even available for purchase for ordinary people and is very expensive, costing up to $5,000 per pill. Faced with his parents' concern, Su-Tui felt a warm feeling in his heart. Late at night, Su-Tui sat on his bed and took the E-grade gene supplement drug, closed his eyes, held his breath, and concentrated. In an instant, he entered his own consciousness world. Energy surged from his stomach to his limbs. The huge energy was infused into his legs, and the excruciating pain almost overwhelmed him. If he continued like this, his legs would definitely explode. Suddenly, Su-Tui divided the energy into 2 parts. He opened his eyes, feeling as if he had escaped a disaster. He didn't expect to activate 2 gene points this time and was very pleased. He felt very tired and fell asleep until he heard a knocking sound in his dream in the early morning. Su-Tui, who was lying on the bed, sat up with a start, but accidentally hit his head on the ceiling when he exerted himself. He got up with difficulty and realized that his leg strength had really increased. Outside the door, his parents heard the noise and thought something had happened. They anxiously pushed open the door and were shocked by the scene before them. Su-Tui, who used to be thin and weak, suddenly became very strong overnight with bulging muscles all over his body. His parents touched Su-Tui's body, showing great joy. "Is this still my son?" Since Su-Tui activated the gene in his legs and hands last night, he clearly felt that his finger strength had improved a lot. It seems that gene points can indeed affect the functions of body parts. Su-Tui thought it was necessary to experiment a bit. He casually picked up a deck of cards and lightly flicked it towards a can on the table. The can was instantly flattened. but throwing cards requires the correct technique, which Sutue is still unable to master. Then he looked at the soybeans on the table. Poker cards are easily affected by airflow, but soybeans aren't. Qian picked up a soybean and gently flicked it towards a soda can. With a bang, the soda can was unexpectedly shattered. This surprised Sutue greatly. Such terrible destructive power, if it were a metal ball hitting a person, the lethality would be immeasurable. A smile appeared on Sutue's face. If he encounters danger again, he has a means of self-protection. Soon, the day of school started as scheduled. The scene was grand with crowds of people. Parents who came to send off their students were endless. Before parting, Sutue's parents repeatedly urged him, with tears in their eyes, to take good care of himself. Sutue said goodbye to his parents and boarded the bus to school with his good friend Chengemo. Just as the two were putting away their luggage, Chengemo proudly said, "I must find a campus beauty as my girlfriend in college." Suddenly, an unpleasant voice came. "Hey, isn't this Chengemo with the Awakening Rice Bucket Gene Point? I heard he was blacklisted by the entire city's self-service restaurant. A toad wants to eat swan meat." Sutue looked at him unfriendly, disgust in his eyes. "He Mingxian, shut up if you can't speak properly." The tension escalated quickly, and the two were about to fight. The leading teacher appeared in front of them and said, "If you want to fight, go outside. Don't make trouble here." Chengemo quickly pacified Sutue. "The teacher is here, let's not cause any trouble. You should be more careful with your words in the future." Sutue turned and was about to leave, but the leading teacher suddenly spoke up. "Don't blame me for not warning you. Don't cause any trouble on the bus. Otherwise, you'll ruin your future." Then, the leading teacher introduced himself. "My name is Chai Feng, and I am the leading teacher for this trip. I'm sure you've all heard that it's been restless lately. I hope all the students will behave themselves on the bus." Chai Feng turned his head and gave Sutue a glare. "If any student wants to find trouble, I'm happy to accompany them." Sutue sat down with a cold face. Chengemo quickly told Sutue, "The person who was sitting next to Mingxian just now is Tong Qi, the top scorer of this year's Awakening with 16 gene points, and the genius girl Gong Lin is also on our bus." "Indeed, beauty and talent coexist," Chengemo said with an infatuated expression, looking at Gong Lin. This made Sutue speechless. But after some careful thought, Sutue felt that something was not quite right. This bus had the most students with gene points in this year, and it must be a key target of the traitor organization's attention. As Sutue was pondering, a beautiful figure appeared from the bus door. Sutue was surprised. Was it her?